All righty. Welcome to the July 19th Public Works Infrastructure Committee meeting. I call this meeting to order. We will start with introductions. Councilman Lesser.
Councilman Lesser, District 9.
I'm Neil Dobler, District 7.
Tony Emerson, District 4.
And it looks like we have Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala joining us online as well. First item of business is to approve the June 21st meeting minutes. You have those minutes in front of you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. All right, first action item is a 2021 project update. Mr. Director?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. To jump right into the project updates, do we have that?
What's it called?
It's called, what is it?
Project update.
Public Works, Streets, and Traffic CIP project updates. Okay, no problem.
I would suggest you go ahead and just
Okay.
start through it. I don't know that we need a
Okay,
graphic
then
for everything.
the first item or the first location on the report is Southwest 10th from Wanamaker to Fairlawn. We've completed the fourth lift between Woodbridge and Chatham Place, and so the local residents can actually go west along that roadway from that particular location on the project. The storm system is still being installed between Chatham and Kent Place, and the fourth lift will be placed once the construction is done with an anticipated completion date of November 19th. The next project is Southwest 12th between Kansas and Washburn. The curb and gutter are being placed between these two locations, or between Kansas and Topeka Boulevard. The subgrade work continues between Topeka and Southwest Western, and there's extensive utility work between Southwest Lane and Southwest Washburn intersections with a completion date for the Kansas to Washburn section on November 23rd. The next project is North Kansas Avenue, Curtis to Norris. This is actually scheduled to open this coming Wednesday. The construction started back in August of 2020, but if you'll recall, there was a need to do some underground boring to place the stormwater utilities underneath the railway, and that caused a delay in this project. Okay. The next project is North Kansas Avenue, Morse to Soldier. This water line replacement is nearly completed, and that's from Morse to St. John. The west half of the Kansas and Morse intersection is expected to be poured in the next few weeks once the curb and gutter are installed. And once that's done, the eastern half will be constructed. The anticipated completion date of the entire intersection is late to mid-August, or mid to late August, and the project completion date is December 2nd. Okay, next up is the Southeast Deer Creek Traffic Way. The southbound lanes continue to undergo extensive full-depth patching. One of the reasons for delay was that we did not anticipate as much sub-base patching as was needed. There was a lot more failure than was initially anticipated. Two-way traffic continues to be maintained at all times, and it's going well so far. Next project is the Central Park Neighborhood Sort Project, which constituted about 38,000 square feet of sidewalk, 5 alleys, and some sewer main work, and we anticipate this will be completed by October 29th. The next project is Lane Street from 15th to 16th. This was an emergency repair that is truly appreciated by the utility department, particularly the manner in which they did the patch. It will improve the pavement condition index for that roadway. Thank you very much. The next project is Southeast 37th Turnpike Bridge to Southeast California. Work is to begin this week after a month-long delay to add the curb and gutter as part of the contract. And all the curb and gutter is going to be replaced on the south side and some on the north, and that's going to be near the bridge. After which, a mill and overlay will be actually constructed as part of this project, and it will be open to through traffic except for 3 days at the end of the overlay work, and it's expected to be completed by late August or early September. The next project is Northwest Furman Road, from Lower Silver Lake Road to a quarter-mile north, and this involves a complete reconstruction, including reshaping of all the ditches and raising the roadbed on the south end of the project. The scheduled bids were opened on June 22nd. Scheduled to be open on June 22nd. Construction is scheduled to begin on August the 2nd, with substantial completion expected October 25th and final completion on November 8th. The next project is Southwest Urish from 21st to 29th, and this is an accelerated repair. It is scheduled for bid opening on June 29th, with construction to begin on July 26th, substantial completion August 27th, with final completion September 3rd. It's going to be a two-phase project, and the split point or the midpoint of the project will be at the golf course, and we're waiting for contracts right now. Yes, sir.
If I could ask a question on that, please.
Sure.
It's supposed to start a week from today, and you don't have contracts yet?
Bid opening. Bid opening a week from today.
No, begin construction says July 26th.
Oh, I'm sorry, correct.
Yeah, it bid a month ago, and Sunflower's low on it. They don't have contracts yet?
And it's going through the approval process, correct?
We tried chasing them down today also. It's still pushing
Moving through the approval process?
to get the contracts back.
I guess, Mr. City Manager, can you follow up on that, please? And
Sure.
if they need to come and walk them through, let's do it.
Okay. All right, thank you. The next project is Southeast 29th and Kansas intersection. Most of the north leg is going to be replaced. The raised median will be removed, and the turn lane will be striped. The middle of the intersection will also be milled and overlaid. The schedule for this project will be bid openings October 13th, the bid construction starting September 13th, with substantial completion by October 22nd and final completion by November 5th. Currently in design, we have 17th, Wanamaker, and Westport and Bridge. Both 17th and I-470 Bridge to Wanamaker and Westport Drive to 17th to Wanamaker will be reconstructed, and this will be in 2022 prior to the start of the Southwest 17th, McVicker, and I-470 Bridge project in 2023 and 2024. The waterline replacement from Westport to the Days End to Econo Lodge will also take place during this time, and the bids will be in the spring. Also in design, Southeast California from 37th to 45th. The plan is to reconstruct Southeast California from a 2-lane rural section to a 3-lane section with curb and gutter, complete street repairs, road rehabilitation, and complete reconstruction from I-70 on the north side to Southwest 45th on the south side. A public meeting is scheduled for 6:30 p.m. on August 5th at the Highland Park Methodist Church at Southeast 29th in Michigan, and the bids will be let in the spring. Next project. Also in design is 17th at McVicker to I-470. This is a public engagement and outreach planning, and preparations are underway. Outreach to business owners, city staff, and elected officials and neighborhood leaders will occur in August, and the public meeting with preliminary plans will be shared in the fall. Construction will begin or will take place in 2023 and 2024. And what we have available to you now, Mr. Chair, are the projects that are currently under design for your review. And any comments or questions?
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Jackson, first of all, thanks for the presentation. I have gotten questions before. You know, you mentioned on the Southwest 10th Street, Wanamaker to Fairlawn, that they've gotten four things of asphalt done, and they're waiting to do the final 2 inches.
Right.
And I've gotten asked that before. People ask, well, why do they wait till the end to do that? Which there's a great reason, but would you mind explaining that? Why we do
You
that?
mean the final 2 inches of the lift?
The cap, yeah. And if you want, I know I'm catching you cold here, I apologize, but, you know, the nice thing is that final lift, as you go through, you have to do it in segments oftentimes, so you're leaving joints in the asphalt.
Right.
At the end, you take that 2 inch and it's all one, basically one coating of that 2 inch. And also the other advantage of that is any scarring and stuff that occurs during construction, you know, they're gonna be traveling over the previously laid asphalt. So there'll be little chips and stuff as you do that. So at the end, before it's done, you have one nice coating of asphalt. So it's a great thing. It's a great process you guys go through. So I just wanted to point out to people that it's not because you don't want to do the final, you know, you don't want to finish it, but you want to leave the finishing coat till the very end.
Okay. The wearing coat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman Lesser. All right, thanks for the update. Let's move to item 4, which is a presentation of the pavement plan for 2022.
And are you going to do that, Robert?
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
Okay.
Yep. While we're pulling up the PowerPoint there, I'm Robert Bidwell, the Pavement Improvements Manager, and I'd like to, before we get started, just give a quick introduction to Matthew Trimble back here. He's a summer intern in the engineering department. He's an engineering student at KU, and we try not to hold that against him. But we've gotten a lot of good work out of him so far this summer, and in return, I hope he's getting a lot of experience and exposure and a little bit of money as well. So,
Great. Welcome.
so we're going to look at the list of proposed projects to be funded in the adopted 2022 CIP. There's $7.6 million out of the citywide house sales tax for the pavement management, rehab and reconstruction program. And the list of projects that we have suggested for consideration will improve about 25 lane miles of roadway between mill and overlay reconstruction and then other forms of pavement repair. Next slide, please. So this is a list of, we have 7 mill and overlay projects identified, and the following slides will just kind of give a brief overview of each one. So the first one's a neighborhood from between 21st and 29th Street and from Urish to Kings Row. We were allotting about $1.4 million to the total budget for this work. Some streets in the neighborhood have been microsurfaced in the last 2 to 3 years, and we're looking at the remaining streets for mill and overlay. The average PCI of those is 48.
Question, Robert. So you're going to leave the microsurface streets, or are you going to mill and overlay them?
No, we're going to leave those.
Leave those. Okay. What kind of condition are they in after 2 years?
I think in general, we plan on getting about 5 years out of the or the microsurface kind of brings the road back 5 years on the degradation curve.
Great, thank you.
There's still a lot of life left in that microsurface.
Councilman?
Thank you, Chair. And can you mill the microsurfacing? Okay, great.
Yep. All right, the next one on the list is Gary Ormsby Drive, east of Topeka Boulevard. It has a PCI of 40, which seems a little generous, I'm sure, given the existing condition. We're looking at about 1.3 miles to the east city limits. We anticipate a significant amount of full depth patching with that, and it's about $1.15 million budget for that work. Next, we have another neighborhood project just east of Indian Hills Road between 22nd Court and 27th Street. Again, several streets have been microsurfaced in the neighborhood recently. I think we're doing a lot of curb and gutter repair in that neighborhood this year, and we'll follow that up with mill and overlay on the remaining streets next year. And then we have neighborhood between 17th and 21st Street, and then from Burnett Road east to Gage Boulevard, and just under $800,000 towards that, and the average PCI in those streets is 50.
When's that scheduled to start?
And these are all suggested for 2022 construction.
Thank you.
This one, Southeast Adams from 37th to 45th. We have that again on the schedule for next year. With that said, we do recognize it's going to be a detour route for California, the California reconstruction project next year. We are looking at an opportunity to try to squeeze that in this fall. They're looking to get an early start in the spring on California, so there may not be time to do a mill and overlay on Adams Street before that project.
Councilman?
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I was kind of wondering about this. I saw there's a $490,000 budget, and in my mind, that's about the same as yours, right? It's about the same distance and width and everything, and it went for, well, $200,000, and I know they had a little bust in their bid, but they're honoring it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other bid was about $300,000 on yours, so I think this be maybe closer to $300,000 on this project.
Well, the length, the total length on Adams is a little bit longer than Urish. We're on Urish, we're stopping quite a bit south of the roundabout at 21st Street. So we're a little bit longer length here. We're looking at those numbers, and we're looking to get something put out this fall on Adams Street.
Great, and if I can follow up.
You bet.
And I saw you have on here full depth patching is needed. So about, I think 4 years ago, we made some modifications to the California Street project. And with the savings, at that time, California between 37th and 45th was about as bad as Adams is now. And what we did is they simply did a change order to the contract in that. And then mill and overlay, just a 2-inch mill and overlay, didn't do any full depth because we knew in 5 or 6 years it was going to get totally torn out. And it's been 4 years now, and it's frankly, it's still really good. That's California from 37th to 45th. And I guess, you guys are the engineers, but based on that, we're going to completely tear this out in 5 or 6 years. Yeah. I guess if it helps to get it done sooner, I guess I would advocate, unless there's some really horrific areas, maybe not doing the full depth patching. Again, it's going to get torn out in 6 years.
Right.
So.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
All right, next on the list, we have 3 streets, Southeast Lafayette, Leland, and Teft Street. We're allotting $250,000 for mill and overlay in conjunction with some other work that's being done in the East Topeka North sort area. And that has an average PCI of those 3 streets is 42. And then the last one we have on the Milton overlay is Northwest Gordon. We received a fair number of complaints on this one. This was a primary detour route when Northwest Vale was reconstructed a couple of years ago. It got a lot of wear and tear from the grain trucks. And so we'll look at a Milton overlay on Northwest Gordon to the west of Topeka Boulevard. Next, we're proposing reconstruction work on 3 stretches of streets. The first one is Southeast Carnahan Avenue, south of I-70 to 21st Street. You can go to the next slide. It has a current PCI of 27 and about just under $500,000 for a budget for that. We have a private drive. This is west of Burlingame Road between Knollwood and 28th Street. And that has about a just over $300,000 budget for reconstruction on that.
Quick question, is that the name of the city street that we're repairing, or is it truly a private drive?
It is truly a private street, but it has public access. I don't know, Mary, if you have, I know you had conversations with Brian on that
Yes, and
previously.
we determined that the city did have the responsibility of maintaining this street.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And the next one is Southwest Kent Place. That's over by the 10th Street reconstruction project. It's a cul-de-sac on the north side, PCI of 15, so it's pretty poor condition. And so we're looking to reconstruct that. And finally, we have a number of miscellaneous pavement repair projects. The first one is Southwest 6th between Oakley and McVicker. We're looking to do some joint repair and panel replacement. And I will mention you should have kind of a recap list of all the projects that was included with all the materials. It does list our PCI map does show that as a 99, but that is obviously not correct. So I just want to point that out. There is significant repair needed to a lot of the joints on there. Next, we're going to help out with the surfacing on 2 water line replacement projects. One is on Jackson Street between 8th and 10th, alongside the Capitol, and then on 21st Street. We've had a lot of breaks there to the west of Topeka Boulevard. So we have some funds identified for the pavement for that. And then Southeast California Avenue at the I-70 interchange. I previously identified to do some median work at that location. And as we're looking at that, there are several pavement panels adjacent to the medians that need to be replaced. And finally, Southeast Golden Avenue north of 21st Street. There's, on the west side of the street, there's substantial erosion in the ditch, and it's starting to erode away at the side of the pavement. So we will be looking to repair that next year as well. And finally, we'd like to set aside $500,000 to accomplish emergency or requested repairs that come up during the year. We had that same amount in our budget this year, and that work went towards doing a pavement repair on Southwest 17th Street by Central Park and Fillmore. We had some pavement panels that were settling. That emergency repair on Southwest Lane, that was mentioned earlier. And then a mill and overlay project at 9th and Fillmore that we're getting ready to put out for bids. And that was requested during the year. And then finally, Wenger Street down at 57th, the north leg of that intersection has a lot of pavement failure, joint failure. So we're looking to repair that as well. And with that, open for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Robert. You know, there's some great photos in here. I'm looking at Lafayette, Leyland, yeah.
Leland.
Leland, sorry. That was a French pronunciation. It'd be really great to go back and get an identical photo when these projects are complete.
Before and after.
You know, I get a lot of questions about it. Of course, everybody's street's bad. But it is a good question. Where's our $14 million a year going? Clearly, we see it. It would be great if there, you know, if the public were able to see what we're really doing. And, you know, once the street's fixed, everybody forgets what it looked like before. So just a thought. Thank you. Any other questions, Councilman?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mr. Bidwell, thanks for the presentation. I did have a couple questions. The first was on Southwest 6th Avenue, the Oakley to McVicker. Do you know when that was constructed?
Not off the top of my head.
I'd say around 10 years ago.
Okay, was that constructed after McVicker was?
It was constructed,
So Dinkle did McVicker from I-70 up to 6th Street.
that is correct, but that was constructed the same time Gage to McVicker was. It went from Gage to Oakley, then Oakley down to McVicker.
Hopefully this predates the new aggregate, the construction of it.
I actually think it does, yes.
Okay.
And when you have that joint failure like that, that's normally what happens, and/or we have failure when they get in there too soon or too late and try to cut those joints. But we seem to have that all over.
Yeah.
And that's a condition that I've been trying to research to try to figure out how we can establish a better technique to try to figure out, for the ACA to figure out if they can find something better to eliminate that kind of condition.
Yeah, because I asked about that as opposed to McVicker. There on McVicker, I think it still looks great. I don't think there are any joining problems.
This predates McVicker.
Okay. Because McVicker was done about 15 years ago.
This
So,
does
okay.
predate it.
Okay. Well, that's good to know because we can't afford to keep doing these concrete streets after 20 or 30 years. They should last, what,
Oh,
50, 60, 100 years? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. The only other question is on the repairs at California and I-70, the bridge is not our responsibility, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Because I've had some people call me about problems on that bridge, so.
Yeah, we're just required up to the apron.
Okay. And the bridge is KDOT then?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions, Councilman?
The only thing I had was when we'd had a previous meeting, we'd talked about staying on top of the 17th Street from the Westport Wanamaker, and you guys have I have not gotten near the calls that I have, so it looks like you guys have been staying on top of that well as far as keeping those patches going, because I was getting 3 or 4 calls a week and I've not received any, so thanks for doing that.
All righty, no further questions. We'll move to item number 5.
Chair,
Yes.
Chair, if I could. So with this, part of the committee's charge is that when there's a project over $250,000 to gain approval of this project, We don't have the actual resolution because we didn't know if there would be changes, questions, et cetera, for approval today. So what we'll do is we'll bring back a resolution for you to approve at your next meeting. Not that they'll slow down. I haven't heard any objections to any of the projects. We'll continue to move forward, but we'll get back the formal approval at the next meeting on a resolution for this.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And to be clear, we will approve a resolution to send to council for
Right,
final
exactly.
approval. Okay,
And then-
very good.
Staff got me the answer to Councilman Emerson's question, and I guess the contract was sent to the city manager this morning. The city manager hasn't been in his office much today to various meetings, so I'm sure my bet is it's waiting on my desk when we get done with this meeting.
I'll bet he's going to find it fairly quickly.
I'll
Yes.
find it pretty quickly, yes. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right, let's move to item number 5, fleet lease program. I assume that's Hannah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So per the request from the last infrastructure meeting, we have gone back and reevaluated the list of assets that we had previously identified to be potential enterprise lease vehicles. So Mary has drafted up an ordinance, or resolution, excuse me, to go forth to this committee and start moving forward with the contract negotiation phase with enterprise. I've also included a lease program summary that shows the different vehicles today that we have identified, but keeping in mind that this list is subject to change up into the day that we receive our new assets. Meaning, in this list that we'll review, there are 2 currently that have already been identified, and a third I found out about late on Friday that have died. So with that, we're instead of dumping more money into these vehicles, we are going to include them on this replacement list. So if any other assets between now and when we would receive our new vehicles fall into that category or have a catastrophic failure, some of these different vehicles may be switched in and out. So some of these numbers are subject to change, but likely won't have a material impact on what I'm going to present. So based on the feedback of last time, we have a max of 50 assets that we've identified. This is spread out across SUVs, 3/4 ton, half ton, and half-ton trucks over a 12-month term. The 12-month term is based on the current market trends of our used vehicles, as well as the low purchase price that we can get into them. The net 1-year impact, including the sale of our current assets, which Enterprise will do on our behalf, as well as the lease payments that we will be liable for from the operational budget perspective, and also taking into account the anticipated resale and equity that we receive at the end of the term, is a negative $207,000, meaning at the end of that term, if Enterprise were to sell our vehicles on our behalf, we could anticipate a check of about $200,000. That $200,000 would have to, at that point, be used to go back into another agreement with Enterprise or to purchase these new vehicles, which is where that cost of exit risk comes into play. So the graph I have included in here shows by department what number of vehicles we currently have identified that make up the 50. So you can see spread out across fire, police, utilities, public works. And right now, planning does have one that fell into that category. What we've paid for our maintenance and repair life to date for these assets. So across these 50 assets, we've paid $940,000. This is inclusive of both the ongoing regular maintenance that we would expect with any vehicle, as well as any additional repairs that had to be made, including the labor time that was accounted for in that, which our billable rate for this last budget year was at $88 an hour, which for repairs is easily 30 to 40% less than what you're going to get in the private sector in a lot of different shops. The estimated non-seen current value of our assets from Enterprise perspective totals of $130,000. So this is subject to change once they lay eyes on our assets and we get the new ones in, because we wouldn't relinquish them until we receive the new. Our lease payments estimated at $276, and then the resale of our lease assets at $362, net the negative $200. At the end of the one-year term, as we've discussed, to purchase new vehicles outright, we're looking approximately $1.7 million. This does account for some of the enhancements that are more pricey, such as the utility bids for some of our trucks. With the net of the $200,000, we're looking at 1.5 in operational expenditures at that time, or what we would revalue into the lease program. Any questions before I get into the graphs below?
Just to make sure I'm clear, so the value of the 50 vehicles, if we sold them probably today, roughly 131,000, correct?
Yes, sir.
If this works, as we anticipate, we go through a year with new vehicles, sell them in a year, we get a check for 207,000.
Yes, sir.
If we had to buy all these vehicles today ourselves, we'd be spending the 1.7, correct?
Yes, sir.
If for some reason we have to buy them all next year, probably a little bit more, but we're still out 1.7 or 8, whatever's going to be there. So, I mean, it makes all kinds of sense to me. I do have one question. What is the likelihood that Enterprise can get 50 vehicles to the city of Topeka anytime in the next 6 or 8 months?
So these are 2023 models. So we will be
Okay.
waiting for manufacturing to complete with those. That way we can get them off the line at the specs that we need. They have tentatively held space for us with the anticipation of us moving forward with some scale with Chevy. So they are very optimistic on that. That is why we've limited the scope to only go up to 3/4, half-ton, and SUVs. Half-tons are going to be questionable. It's going to depend upon when we place the order and when the prices go out. Currently, the market is such that a lot of entities are placing orders based off estimates. So we won't receive the half-ton pricing from Ford, I believe, until August 15th. I have to verify that date. But we don't have yet solid pricing and incentives back because with the new models, they just haven't released it yet. But there is a chance if we don't move quickly upon placing the orders that we will lose that. Because they have the buying power they have, there's a higher likelihood that we can secure the 50 and get them in production, but it's still a very volatile market, which does limit our abilities on some of these different makes and models. We are in this model with having estimated cost. I did do a 6% increase with that to try to account for what we're anticipating the 2023 models being versus the 22 that we had priced out with Enterprise prior to. So this does account for some of that. I also priced in some of the additional enhancements from the utility bed perspective, since it is a large impact for some of our trucks, and increase both the lease payment and the value of the asset accordingly. So I'm hoping that I inflated it a bit more than what we actually see, but it should be on the conservative side, and we shouldn't get too terribly much more than what's in here in terms of the value.
Very good, thank you. Any questions? Councilman?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, this looks great, but my question is if we come to next year, we get all the vehicles, and then after a year, we can decide, correct, to simply keep them? And is that what the $1.4 million is then, or?
The $1.4 million is if we decide to cash out the $200,000 in equity and put that towards buying new vehicles. So we could keep those assets at what the book value is for them. And the only way I would recommend that is if the market did flip and we were no longer seeing the $200,000, because that is more advantageous than just keeping those and purchasing new at that time. But yes, in theory, we could just pay off and keep the existing assets, or pick and choose, quite frankly. If there's some that maybe wouldn't drive the same resale value as what others would based on condition or mileage, we could choose to do different things at that point based on the individual asset itself. So we wouldn't be tied into one or the other.
Okay. And you'd make that determination at that time, correct? Depending on the market.
Relatively close, yeah. So we'd want to do a little bit out just because right now, quite frankly, we're a little late to the game in terms of committing to the next year's models to ensure that we get space on the lines. but we would want to evaluate that likely 6 to 9 months into the program to determine the viability moving forward.
Okay, great, thank you.
Question? Nope. Very good. Go ahead.
So the bottom two graphs really just help visualize the pieces that are above. So the one to the left is the maintenance and repair costs by model by year. The average age of the vehicles that we're flipping out is approximately 16 years old, ranging everything from 1993 up to 2012. But you can see in here, based on the different departments, what years have huge spikes and where you start to see some of those models getting up there. The part on the maintenance repair I want to kind of put the caveat with is that we know some of our older vehicles, as we've talked before, are slightly underutilized in some of our departments because there are backups. Because we know our go-to model breaks down a lot. So that's where we spend more of our maintenance dollars, oddly enough. But that is why some of those 1993 to 2002 have relatively low maintenance and repairs over the life of it, is because we've let it sit for a large amount because we know our current one that we use day to day continues to break. This will allow us to flip that, replace out those old ones that are likely to have large issues continuing forward, to get new ones in and then be able to reevaluate the size of our fleet. With the maintenance and repair components in here, as you can see, that does not account for fuel and some of the other savings that we will be anticipating as well with these vehicles as we move forward. A 1993 truck is likely to have a far different gas mileage than a 2023 truck. So some of those operational efficiencies we'll definitely start to realize at a department level. The type of vehicle, which is the graph to the right, shows the large influx of the 1500, so your half-ton trucks with a secondary rate of the 25, and then the Traverse with the SUV flip-out being the smaller, based on the assets that we've currently identified, but is subject to change with the needs of the divisions.
Okay, Councilman.
Thank you, Chair. On the graph, on the left graph, first of all, can you tell me what the vertical axis is? Is that thousands of dollars or?
Yes, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I should have expanded that out, but yes.
And is that just the average per vehicle?
Yes, so average per vehicle per year. So it's trying to look at and say, each year, what is the likelihood we're going to spend money additional to it or continue on that trend? We know it's not linear, and so we know that it's been smaller and gotten larger over the years, but to give some sort of relative comparison point for an average year, that's what it's breaking out.
But is it equally weighted? I mean, is 2005, for instance, is the average high because that's a particular vehicle that's maybe in the water department or something that gets more miles? I mean, is it normalized like with mileage or?
It's not normalized by mileage. It truly is just kind of a quick weighted average. If you wanted additional analysis, we can definitely do some of that. When we were picking out which vehicles, the logic that Brian, my fleet manager, was using was the cost of lifetime maintenance and repairs with the mileage as a secondary, and then the age of the vehicle coming into play as well. So we took all three factors when we chose the vehicles to make sure that as we were going through that list, we are tackling the ones that we know are costing us a lot of money to help try to change that curve.
Okay, thank you.
We could probably analyze using regression equations.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, very good. One quick question. So police and fire between them have 12 vehicles. What kind of vehicles are they getting and what are their uses?
SUVs and more on the
Okay.
admin side.
The Traverse?
With police, we didn't want to do the frontline black and whites,
Right, okay.
nothing of that nature. So it's truly to get a sense of what is the impact to their operations on that side of their fleet, but wanting to make sure that we had a representation of essentially our entire light-duty fleet.
Okay, makes sense. All right, I believe at this point we need to take action on the resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I will, if there's no other questions or comments, look for a motion.
Chair, I'd recommend that, I'd recommend that we recommend to the council that they approve this.
Great.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you very much for all your work. I
Yeah.
think this is a great way to go about it. It's a good test drive. No pun intended. Thank you. All right, item number 6, firm project resolution.
So with the firm, we actually have 2 different topics. We have the resolution, which are our new projects that we're going to go over, as well as I have a secondary memo that I apologize wasn't attached, but I will send out, that has updates on the unexpected repairs. So to start with the resolution for the planned expenditures, this is for the fire station renovation program. On the top of the memo, we've laid out what the funding source, or the funding amount by year, has been approved. So we know in 2020, and I acknowledge that we kind of put a hard stop on spending until we had a better constructive plan and path forward. So with that, we did expend $72,000 in the fire station, so relatively small. We're currently requesting $800,000 out of the 2022 and $4.3 out of our 2021. So this is a very large package we're putting forth. That has been worked through primarily by SDG, but does have has another roof replacement that was already in flight. So looking through what the different packages we're putting together is based on the project grouping priority that we aligned with both the fire admin as well as the facilities staff. So the first priority was essentially fixing your core, meaning your HVAC systems, your roofs, and some of your foundational systems. If we don't fix the roof and water gets in and we fix something else, might as well have not done the first time. So the first package in looking through is the roof replacements on 4 and 7, because we know that those both are very much in need of it, as well as the fire station 11 is broken out separately for its roof. Pavement, HVAC, lighting, and fire alarm systems is one package that we're working on currently getting spec'd out so we can go to bed. The next project group is the windows, generators, apparatus exhausts, access control, dryer, sand oil, separators. So some of the secondary priorities that were identified by the core group, generators being a key one, knowing that with this last year and some of the power outages that we did have, there is a concern that, if we lose power, those bay doors are exceptionally heavy and hard to open in the event of emergency. Not impossible, might I add. We do have manual overrides, but they are very heavy. So wanting to get generators that can help support these stations in the event of a shutdown. Any questions on the fire stations before we move into some of the balance of the program?
Just maybe just to illustrate the point here, so you had a consultant do a study of all the fire stations, identify the critical, I think you mentioned core.
Yep.
Repairs needed just to keep things going. These are the highest priorities of those, and the additional funding in 2021 is due to excess funding that we had available that we talked about several weeks ago. So appreciate the quick turnaround on this.
Absolutely. And we are currently working, SDG was the one that came in and did the condition assessments and readout for us. And then we took that information and created the priorities with the fire admin and firefighters to be really kind of that committee look and to make sure that what is important to them is something that we weighed in. With that, this truly is not hitting that renovation line. So while we have identified improvements in terms of upgrades, and modernization, there's bits and pieces as it fit with the scope of the core infrastructure components, but the renovation components would likely come in 2022 after we ensure that the core aspects are in good standing.
Very good. Any other questions? Question? Okay. All right, go ahead, please.
So the second part is the balance of the firm program. So as we've discussed before, we did break out the funding allocation. While it's one line within the CIP, we are treating it as essentially 2 sub-projects So the balance are the top priority that have been identified thus far with our MEP assessments, as well as the start of our envelope assessments, meaning the roof, windows, foundation, those sort of items. And these were identified as critical, number 1 or number 2 condition, so meaning needs to be replaced immediately because it's already failed or is going to fail likely in the very near future. With this, out of this bucket, the zoo had funding as part of it to begin out with. In 2020, there's $100,000. We had previously expended $312 out of our total approved. Working on what we've brought to you thus far, which does include the unexpected. We've previously approved $744, and then currently out of the 2020 requesting $360, and out of 21 requesting another $360. So we still have a balance in our 21 funded budget, but these are just the identified 1 and 2. We haven't gone through the same exercise of prioritizing it holistically. These were just the immediate have to fix now or we're going to have issues items. It is inclusive of the items that are listed below. The biggest ones, the boiler replacement and condensing unit here at Holiday. We've had a lot of issues with that over the last year. In fact, there's an ongoing leak that we weren't able to address during the winter because we weren't able to shut the system off. So getting those replaced, a number of TPAC updates, including HVAC improvements, roof and envelope issues, as well as a few items within the LEC, including their overhead door for their underground parking garage.
Sorry.
Nope. With that, I'll stand for any questions that you have with the firm program on the planned expenses.
Just to make sure I understand the spreadsheet up here, so in the 2020 budget, 1.3 million was approved for the firm program, correct?
For this component of it, yes. So it's a
Right.
sub of, yeah.
You've spent 300,000, which leaves 700,000 roughly, and you're requesting current requested total. So you're requesting another 360,000?
That's essentially the sum of what is below.
Okay,
So the different projects that we haven't brought to you specifically.
okay, got it. Questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Second and Golden, what is that?
That's our property maintenance facility. So we have a couple individuals that office out of there, as well as store a lot of our equipment and different items they need. It's essentially a large yard that has a couple buildings just stood up.
Is it there by Shriner Construction?
Is it?
Okay. By Mark's camp.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm geographically challenged. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that, so
Okay, thank you.
no problem.
Okay, questions? So is there an action here?
This is another resolution that was attached in there that spells out these different projects.
I'm not sure we have the resolution.
The resolution, yeah.
Thought that one was on the email.
We do the parking infrastructure thing.
Okay, that's it. Pretty straightforward.
Oh, we're going to pick up 1 hour.
Yeah. Get your attorney to check it over. Okay. Yeah, you did send it earlier, we just didn't have it in our packet. All right, if there's no further questions, what's the pleasure of the body?
Chair, I move that we recommend approval of this resolution to the entire council.
Second. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you very much. Again, good work.
So the next one was not in your packet, so I do apologize. But I will send it out after this. It is an updated memo for the unexpected repairs that we've had to do within the firm program. So we have a couple new ones that are were not previously presented and a couple updates on two of them that we had from you last time. The new one at first is the City Hall shutoff valve replacement. So to be able to better regulate the temperature within our City Hall building after installing the reheat unit for TPAC, the shutoff valve was a critical component. Turns out it's broken, so we have to replace it. Right now, that project is still in progress, so final amount will be included at a later date, but it's approximately $19,000. The second is Second and Golden again. The compliance office with the HVAC unit was broken and also located inside one of the offices, which is a high concern from a just safety and well-being perspective. So looking to replace that out and update it for $7,000. And then the next two on the list were just updates based on actualized numbers that we've gotten back from projects that we've presented to you prior. So the first one is the fire station number 7 ceiling, so the plaster ceiling that had integrity issues. We have since gone back to ensure that the balance of the ceilings within the fire station are properly secured. So our previous amount was not inclusive of that initiative, so it did increase from $8,000 to $34,000. We are also still in progress in terms of evaluating some of our other sites and ensuring that everything has been punched out, so we'll present once we have a truly finalized invoice again. The other one was an update with a slight change, a $2,000 difference from the Holiday Building water line replacement that we had previously presented on, so pretty close in terms of our initial estimates, but have that updated and completed.
Very good. Any question? If I'm correct, this is just an informational item, correct?
Correct. You've already passed the resolution to give budget authority for unexpected. This is just to
Right.
update you on how we're allocating these funds.
Itemizing. Very good. Questions?
What's the scope of the ceiling repair?
Initially, we tore down the plaster in the bunks, in the sleeping bunks, and put up drywall. We are going through the balance of that facility and ensuring that we have re-secured with different mounting brackets and the proper screws, and looking to patch those spots that the ceiling has now been modified. So initially, it was just a tear down and mitigate. Now we're ensuring that nothing else that is within that facility has that same issue. We are looking at also evaluating the balance of our stations that were built around and have similar ceilings, built around the same time and have similar ceilings, to ensure that they were not done by the same contractor and have the same flaws in terms of securing them properly. But we have yet to get back a final bid for that, but that is on our scope to ensure that we check our ceilings because it's not visible to the eye. So it's something that does take a little bit more investigation.
Was it lath and plaster in 7
Yes, sir.
that came down, was it?
Given how long that fire station was standing, pretty good quality. However, when they got in and further investigated, and Mark could probably help correct me here, not my specialty, but the screws that were used to secure them were not long enough, so the brackets gave way and collapsed prematurely.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thanks for that presentation. If there's no further questions, we'll move on to item 7, parking garage infrastructure and parking fund. And
Okay.
I'm
Well,
assuming it's Hannah again.
this time it's only me for a little bit.
Okay,
So I'll get you started and then Jason will actually take over.
all right.
So in 2019, we started talking with the full governing body about rate modifications for our parking system. It was identified that we needed this to support both the modernization efforts that were requested for our downtown as we continue to grow, as well as to address the deferred maintenance of our infrastructure that was becoming very visible and had been lapsed for many years. As a result of COVID, we tabled these conversations. So we had a hard stop, but unfortunately, our infrastructure hasn't magically improved. And in fact, in many ways, it's getting worse. So with that, I would also like to introduce Jason Tryon. He's my business operations manager. He's responsible for the business side of the parking department in partnership with facilities, who manages the infrastructure component, to give an overview of our parking, focused on what our current financial situation is, our infrastructure needs, as well as to introduce some of the improvements that we have completed and are working on currently within that division.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just a quick overview of what we'll cover. First of all, understanding what the budget looks like today, particularly what the last 18 months have done given the pandemic. Some of the recent changes we've made, our proposed budget for 2022 and what the limitations are involved there. The assessments that were done of the garages, and then we'll go over some funding options for repairs and then talk about some future improvements. So if you want to go to the next slide, this will give you an overview of what revenue has looked like over the last 16 months. So obviously you can see there's a gray line up there. That's the 2020 revenue. Initially at the beginning of the year, revenue was very strong, but then when the pandemic hit, the decision was made to forego revenue for April and May, which is where you see that steep drop. Once we began charging again, you can see that revenue did not recover to the full 2019 levels. Went nearly back up to those levels, but then continued to decline throughout the year. The lowest point was actually in Q4 of last year, where we were down about 35 to 40% on a monthly basis in revenue. It has since recovered, as you can see in that yellow line there for 2021, but we are not back up to 2019 levels of revenue at this time. With that, if you go to the next slide, we've lost in total roughly $1.2 million in revenue that we would have expected to receive in that time. Because of that, the Parking Revenue Reserve Fund has taken a hit. When the initial issues came up with the pandemic, we stopped all repairs at that point essentially and did only what was urgent. We have decided at this time that there are some repairs that do need to take place at the Townside Garage that we are currently bidding out. Some have already been completed because they were urgent, and we are currently in the bid process, which is why you see that reserve fund declining toward, it is now forecasted at the end of the year to be down to about $1.5 million, where it started the year at $2.5 million. Some of the recent changes that you may or may not have been aware of, we've instituted a mobile payment app for paying for permits and meter parking downtown. So you've probably seen some of the stickers or signage downtown. This is a great option for people that don't carry cash, like a lot of the younger people that we have using our downtown these days. It allows you to pay by a smartphone-based app. You can actually extend your time without having to be at the physical meter. So if you're in a meeting and it tells you your meter's almost up, you can actually extend the time if you're still allowed to by the ordinance. It allows us to sell permits online. We don't have to issue hang tags anymore, which is very nice. And this also helps with our increased reporting capability to know exactly what our most used sites are downtown. Also, it does give us the ability in the future to actually charge for parking in an area that does not have physical meters if we choose. So that's not something we're currently doing, but we would have that option in the future. So far, most of our customers are still paying by coin, but that has increased over time. So we rolled this out at the very end of last year. Initially, very few of our customers were paying using the app, but we're now up to about 20% as of June. Most widely adopted in our 10-hour meters, which makes sense. Those are the people that are typically coming and using a meter almost every day. So those folks have adopted to using the payment app, but most of our customers are still paying by cash. What you see here is a brief synopsis of our 2022 proposed budget. You can see the total revenue there of $2.5 million. That is still down from 2019, as I know some of the council members asked prior to the budget presentation. We are forecasting that our revenue will be up from 2021, but not fully returning to 2019 levels in 2022. And as you can see, this does create an operating deficit because of the capital improvements that are needed to the garages. So on operating expenses alone, if we did not make some of the capital improvements that are needed, this would still be negative of about $50,000 just on operating expenses. But with the capital repairs needed, this would result in a deficit for the year of almost $1.4 million. So moving on to what some of those capital repairs are that are needed. We commissioned Walter P. Moore from Kansas City to assess 4 of our garages across 8 different categories. So they completed that in Q4 of 2020 and then presented them earlier this year. All of the estimates are in 2021 dollars, and they're forecasted out over the course of 10 years for a couple of reasons. One, to make sure that the work is being done sequentially. And then also making sure that we're taking into account any ongoing maintenance costs that would need to be absorbed after the improvements are made. Obviously, any of the numbers that we go over here are estimates. They could change, and the longer we wait, the cost will likely go up. So in total, if you go to the next slide, thank you. The garages need about $1 million annually over the next 10 years in improvements according to the studies that were done. The garages themselves generate close to $2 million in annual revenue, but they have a capital improvement need right now of $1 million a year over the next 10 years. So a couple of things that I do want to point out. They only studied 4 garages. My staff went through and looking at the age and square footage of the garages. We made some estimates of what we believe could be needed improvements on the other 3 garages just to get a sense of how much the entire garage system might need. But those are just estimates. They are not based on actual on-the-ground estimates from the engineering firm. They're just based on, for example, if they're estimating based on the square footage of one garage what traffic coding would cost, we can extrapolate that out to a degree for some of the other garages as well. Just a few images to show you some of the things that were observed during that assessment. These pictures are all from town site, and you can see where some water penetration that has occurred over time has caused some issues both to the electrical system, as you can see the rusted out electrical box there, and then also the water penetration has caused some concrete spalling and also some damage to the expansion joints inside the garage. These are just a few more images from 9th Street, Coronado, and Parking Shop, where you can see that some water penetration has caused some concrete degradation inside those garages as well. This will give you just a brief idea of what the expense within garages are. So you can see mapping out there about $2 million in total revenue, and then in orange you can see the operating expenses that are assessed against the garages each year. And then the needed capital expense, which was forecasted in the 2022 budget there of $1.1 million, which takes us to a negative budget. And this will show you over time what the repairs will look like. Obviously, most of the repairs they were recommending within the first 4 years because of the urgency of some of them. So $2 million a year in the first 4 years, and then approximately $450,000 a year in years 5 through 11. And you can see which garages were needing the most repairs most quickly, according to their recommendations. On the next slide, this will show you the category of the repairs. So the early focus was on electrical work that is needed, mainly replacing a lot of lighting systems and a lot of electrical conduit within the garages. And then over time, those costs were shifting more towards waterproofing to make sure that those repairs aren't needed to be made again as frequently in the future. This just illustrates the garages themselves compared to their total revenue and the total cost projected. I wanted to note that Coronado and Townsite, being a couple of our oldest garages, are the ones that are needing the most share of the repairs compared to the revenue that they do generate. This is an example of how they laid out the different repairs over time. This is just one example for Townsite for their structural and waterproofing estimates that they provided. We have all of this detail for everything they recommended, which we can share with you, but we didn't want to go into all of those in this meeting. So what I want to do at this point is talk about just the overall issue with the parking fund. Obviously, as we just talked about, we've known for some time that the current operating budget within parking does not cover all of the repairs needed. So I wanted to discuss some of the different options that we would have to address that. So going over the options to either reduce expense or raise capital. We'll talk a little bit about expenses, and then some of our options for raising capital would include selling some of our assets, which we should consider, raising revenue through increased fees or fines, and then also raising capital through financing is an option that we have as well. So first off, just looking at the expense that's proposed in the 2022 budget, you can see how our expenses break down. Most of the expense associated with parking is what I would call non-discretionary, so things like property insurance, maintenance, utilities. Less than 25% of our operating expense on an annual basis goes to employees and our office expense. So most of it is what I would consider non-discretionary spending. In terms of options to raise funding, Columbia Capital did present us with a draft study in February of 2020. Very poor timing. if you're going to assess the capital and revenue of parking garages, February 2020 was a time that the ink was not dry on that study before it was pretty outdated. But a couple of things that they did cover is that there are several risks associated with selling a parking garage. While we would decrease some potential liability or contingent costs, we would increase competition if we were to sell one of the garages, which could negatively impact our revenue long term. The other thing that they wanted to consider was that selling one or two garages wouldn't materially reduce our operating costs. We would still have significant costs for our maintenance staff and the software that supports those garages. We would be losing the revenue, but we would not be taking the expense down as far as the revenue that we had lost. And the long-term economic development of our downtown could be negatively impacted if we sell a garage. The other thing to consider is that it's very difficult to find comps for parking garages. There's very few cities similar to Topeka, and garages don't sell very frequently. So getting a comparable cost is very difficult, and any time it's been brought up in the past few years, what someone will be willing to pay for a parking garage, it's very far apart from what we would consider what we would sell it for. So moving on, another option that we would have would be to raise our fees. So currently we charge the same rate for all of the parking garages with the exception of 9th Street Garage. Our parking garage monthly pass is $67.75. 9th Street is 2/3 of that, $47.43 a month. And then we do offer a reserved space in Center City for $75. But for the most part, all of our parking garages are the same cost. If you can look, we did install in 2019 some systems that allow us to track exactly what the usage rate of each of our garages are, which can inform us in the future to potentially charging differential rates for our garages. So if we're seeing that certain garages are more full consistently, then it would make more sense to charge more for those garages and not charge the same amount for each space.
That would be for hourly parkers, correct?
For hourly or monthly. So we would have the option to change either. So if is a particular garage that is more consistently full, we could charge more for that garage. Currently, like I said, every garage is $67.75. But prior to the pandemic, we were seeing very different physical occupancy rates within the garages. While I do think that that is an option for us at this time, our current occupancy for leased space is 74%, but in terms of the... Sure,
We've
go
got
ahead.
a question.
Yeah, Mr. Trine, did you say though 9th Street is different pricing?
9th Street is 2/3 the cost of the other garages, so $47.43.
And 9th Street would be which one?
9th Street is the garage right outside the Burlington Northern Santa Fe buildings. You can actually see it out the window if the blinds are open.
Because there's another one on 9th Street, right, at 9th and Kansas? Is that Crosby?
So, so there's 3 within close proximity. They're all in fairly close proximity, obviously, but 9th Street would be the one that is closest to I-70. Immediately across the street from 9th Street is the Coronado Garage. Coronado Garage is also $67.75, and that has all reserved spaces. Center City is at 8th and Kansas, or the entrance is actually off 9th Street. So Center City is the garage that is directly on Kansas Avenue, between Kansas Avenue and the Capitol building.
Right, okay.
That's called Center City.
Why is 9th Street a different price? Why is it 2/3?
My understanding, that predates my time here, but part of that was a negotiation with Burlington Northern Santa Fe, because they actually own the land and we own the garage, that garage would be at a discounted rate compared to the other garages.
And that is for the life of the garage. So there's no term on that agreement. When it was built, that was one of the conditions.
So that's not just for their employees, that is if you're anybody who wants to rent in there.
Correct. So we would still have the option to raise prices in that garage, but it would have to be proportionally discounted to the balance of the remaining garages.
Right, only if you raise the other ones.
Correct.
That would always be 2/3 of the other ones.
It has to be 2/3 at the lowest price publicly owned garage. So that's how they structured, I think initially when they had built it, they were overwhelmingly the dominant tenant. And so directly benefited from it. And while they are still the largest tenant, that is one of the more underutilized garages in our system. It holds true for any customer who wants to use it. So when we had proposed it pre-COVID, we had proposed essentially guardrails, is what we had kind of described them as, meaning a minute and a max for any public parking, whether it be hourly or monthly on a lease rate. Ninth would always be the lowest for our contractual terms. And quite frankly, based on its geographic location, it's likely not going to be the highest demanded garage. So it works out both ways, because the idea is the more prime spot, the higher the rate, so that we could better utilize our holistic parking infrastructure versus right now, or I say right now, pre-COVID, it was clear, you would see a definite spike where we had current businesses and some of the other garages were much lower occupancy. But as we know, with our downtown growing, that is subject to change. You get a new business that comes in along the strip in an otherwise underutilized area, and that can dramatically change that particular garage. So by providing the min and max, it allows Jason and his team to evaluate that on a regular, ongoing basis to ensure that we continuously evolve with our downtown.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, the most important factor in which garage you pick is how many steps to where I'm going. So as the different businesses come and go and the occupancy around the different garages changes, we want the flexibility in the future to adjust our pricing to reflect that. While I was talking about raising fees, one thing to note is that right now the physical occupancy, so this is showing for the year, so the top graph there is showing how many of the spaces are leased. The bottom is showing how many actual physical cars are in the garage on an average basis. So as of right now, we're only looking at the garages being about 24% full on a day-to-day basis. So while we want the option to raise rates into the future, we're not suggesting we raise them today, while we still consider a lot of people are working from home and our occupancy is not where we'd like it to be.
And one of the things to keep in mind when we talk about the rates, it's not necessarily just to always raise them. So right now we have a very low occupancy. If we were to have the flexibility to lower our rates to help encourage adoption and use of the garages, it could help with that occupancy and help generate revenue. We know long-term, overarchingly, it's likely to increase as a holistic system because just like inflation and everything else, it does. And as we continue to see growth in our downtown and we have more businesses come back, knock on fake wood, we will see that demand grow. And as we see that, we can adjust accordingly. But that was always one of the pieces while we continue to say raise rates, it truly gives us that flexibility to lower them when times dictate. And we all know once you get used to something like not having to scrape your car during winter, even if it becomes slightly more expensive, you're likely to still do it. But it is a way to better utilize our parking structures and get people off the street to leverage that system in holistic manner.
We've also considered some additional pricing options for a more hybrid model for someone who isn't using a garage space every day, but would want something like a 10-day pass for a discounted rate. So for example, people that are no longer in the office 5 days a week, but maybe a couple days a week, an option that would entice them to reserve a parking space without having to pay the full rate. So those are some of the options that we're considering to address that occupancy. The other factor that we do need to consider is that parking is not just the garages. We do also raise revenue from on-street parking. And one of the economic realities that we have to face is that parking meter revenue has dropped considerably since 2015 when Kansas Avenue was no longer metered. So that meter revenue has declined by about $400,000 a year since 2015. While we all love supporting our local downtown businesses, we do have to acknowledge that that is one of our most valuable assets, and it doesn't generate revenue currently. Our last rate adjustment was in 2010, where meter rates went from 90 cents an hour to $1 an hour. And also, since the construction was completed on Kansas Avenue, originally the 100 blocks on each side of Kansas Avenue were designated to be covered with those yellow hoods during the construction to make sure people still had access to parking while Kansas Avenue was having work done on it. But those have never been removed, and so those spaces are not generating revenue either at this point. Those spaces are separate zones where people are permitted to park for 2 hours a day, but one thing that we do see is that we see a lot of people hopping from zone to zone. So while we intended those spaces to be used for visitors and people who are using the downtown businesses, we see a lot of residents or full-time employees that are going out and moving their car every couple hours. So the spaces are not necessarily being taken up by people who are shopping or dining downtown, but are in the office buildings and trying to work around the rules. So what we're left with right now is kind of the worst of all worlds on those 100 blocks where they're not generating revenue, they're not necessarily encouraging visitors' use, and they're not aesthetically pleasing, if you ask me. And so we would like to establish some type of a long-term plan. If we don't intend to charge for those spaces, we could remove the meters. If we do intend to charge them in the future, have a plan for how we intend to do that and how long they would remain in place.
What are the ramifications of removing the hoods and starting to charge again?
There is no specific ordinance that was put in place. I believe it was done in 2017, but I would have to go back and look. But that would just be something the council would have to approve. I don't know what the specific mechanism was that put those in place.
The only risk to removing those at this point would be we'd have to assess the current condition of the meters under the hood. Knowing how long they've been sitting there, there's likely to be a number of them that are not going to be functional. The operational cost to replace them with new meters is very high, as we explored previously. So we'd want to evaluate how many backups that we currently have salvaged that we could replace that out. But from a operational standpoint, there is no ramifications from our standpoint. It'd be more of the general public awareness campaign, just to make sure that they know it is no longer a free zone.
The other thing that does also play into our revenue is that we currently allow residents or businesses to hood particular meters on the street at a charge of $6 per day if they would like to reserve a space. That was originally intended for construction or for contractors who are working on the building. It has since been extended to lots of different uses, and I can tell you $6 a day is not enough for the cost of sending people out to put the hoods on and off. They're typically hooded for more than one day because we have to put them on in the afternoon the day before, take them off the day after, and $6 per day they're worth more than that. So that would also be something we'd like to increase the cost of. Also because every time we hood a meter, while it's good for one person, we do typically get calls from the businesses in the area saying, why is that space reserved? Now I don't have a parking space available in front of my business. So that is something that is a point of contention for our staff. Also, just overall, when we talk about the on-street parking, the system right now I would consider pretty convoluted. It's difficult to understand. It's not easy to explain. And if you actually look at a map, which parking spaces are governed by what rules, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We would like to simplify this as part of our overall comprehensive plan, reducing some of the different zones. Right now we have half hour, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour. What we'd like to do is simplify that into either 2 or 4 hour zones. Giving people an option for some longer term parking in some areas if they're willing to walk further, but not have as many different options available. The other option that we do have for raising revenue is that we could charge more for violations. We currently charge $8. This isn't something that we like to do to raise revenue, but we do have to consider the citation has to be of a high enough cost to discourage people from violating the rules. At $8, it's not very much. I've gotten a brief sample there of what some of the other areas charge for, but like I said, this isn't going to raise significant revenue. It's currently less than 7% of the parking revenue comes from citations. So the other option that we would have would be to seek bond funding. If we were to try and bond fund the entire $8 million over the next 4 years that was recommended, it would be a very significant expense. Roughly $600,000, $634,000 was the exact estimate I got from our finance department. We do currently have a little under $7 million of outstanding debt for the Center City and Crosby garages that mature in 2036. But this is an option. It would be hit to our operating budget, but that is an option for some or all of the needed repairs. Moving on, some of the upcoming improvements that you're going to see in parking as we make some of these changes is a more interactive map. Like I said, it is confusing as far as knowing where you can park. We are working with our technical support group to put something available on the city website that would make it much easier to see where can I park and get the relevant information. Also would directly link to being able to apply for a parking garage space or a street permit. So that's something that we think is very necessary to avoid a lot of the confusion out there right now. We will also be looking to make available to you in the future more comprehensive reporting so that all the numbers we've gone over today you can access whenever you'd like. See what the revenue is coming in at the different garages, what our occupancy use is, and have that information available to you whenever you'd like it. And then in addition to some of the other reporting, working with our passport providers to understand where are people parking the most on the street, where are we generating citations, both from understanding do we need to make changes to our policies, to our ordinances, or are there just some places that are causing more confusion, and we might want to clarify the signage or make sure people are more aware of what the rules are around that location. We do, from time to time, hear a lot, have pockets where we get a lot of citations and hear from somebody, well, the person at the front desk told me I could park there and it was free. And we work with our local businesses to make sure and understand that they're explaining the rules properly and that our guests to downtown know what the rules are. So this can help us identify where we have some areas where there appears to be some confusion out there. That covers the presentation. What we needed to kind of do from this point forward is understand what some of the preferences are amongst the governing body. As I've learned since taking over this position, parking is a topic that there's a lot of passion around. It's an emotional topic. And while we consider the different options available to us, we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that would be against the preferences of the governing body before we make more concrete recommendations.
Great. Good presentation, a lot of information. One question probably for the city manager. So looks like the total decline in revenue, I'm going to say due to COVID, is $1.2 million under the American Rescue Act. Is that an allowable?
So far, they have not allowed us to pull separate enterprise funds out as being something that we can renovate, that we can reimburse. And so I'm going to dig a little harder on that because I know the number. I had not seen the final number of what they were saying was the impact. I knew it was large, and so I'd already been looking at that issue and had pointed out and listened specifically for input from other organizations on how they were handling that. But so far, we haven't found any way to do that because they look at it as your general overall fund, general fund, even though we classify this as an enterprise. They don't tell anywhere within the regulation that you can do an enterprise fund and reimburse it, such as water and sewer and so forth. So far, I haven't found a mechanism to do that, but I really believe it is one of our biggest needs to be able to replace this revenue.
So we can do water and sewer because it's specifically stated in the legislation?
We can do the infrastructure improvements to those locations. We couldn't replace their revenue loss if they had one.
Okay.
We didn't see a revenue loss with them because people continued to do that, or in any great measure. This one, we could definitely show that it was an impact, especially when for 2 months there was no collections in our garages based on these situations that were occurring. So we can clearly point to the impact that it was held by this with people working from home because of the pandemic and so forth. So trying the best we can, but so far it hasn't materialized as a solution.
Yeah, something we certainly need to keep looking into. Yeah, a lot of thoughts on this one. I think this is probably one. What's the urgency at this point? How quickly do we need to figure out how to produce more revenue, however that is?
Our needs currently far surpass our revenue. So the more quickly we can start to address some of these issues, the better off we're going to be as a city. In terms of needing to address the holistic view with rates and what that looks like going forward, while right now I don't feel that would be advantageous to raise the rates, and Jason and I are very much aligned in where this forecast is and the reason that we have planned our 2022 budget the way we have, based on the timing it takes, given the passion around parking. I do feel that this is something that we need to start bringing back up with our community partners, whether it be DTI, and Rhiannon and I have had a few conversations regarding it in our downtown businesses to start to engage with them again, to be able to move forward with the governing body's support of a change. And whether that change is specific rates or if it's the guardrails that we had presented last time, I feel very strongly that as the organization has evolved, and putting Jason in his place and the evolution of the technology and the reporting and the visibility we have, that we have a team in place that could sustain the analysis component of being able to manage that effectively to ensure that as we have changes downtown, whether it's the positive with more people coming back, new businesses, or if it is a prolonged challenge that we have, whether somebody moves out or does a more hybrid work from home plan that we hadn't previously anticipated, we can adjust accordingly without going through the governing body and, quite frankly, the very emotional conversations that are associated with parking with all of our downtown partners, because we're not here to generate a revenue. We're here to sustain a mechanism that supports our continued growth. And I feel that over the last couple of years, as I've been in my position, I can't necessarily speak before, we've gained a lot of support and partnership with those individuals where we have a higher level of confidence and trust that we can make those decisions within the guardrails of the governing body components, but not be handicapped in a time where it's hard to manage and adjust.
Thanks for that. It is a unique part of the city. Specific to downtown, I mean, we don't enforce parking anywhere else. City builds parking garages because nobody else can afford to, and yet here we are. I think, I'm going to suggest that we focus on the parking garages to start with. Good information here. I think a couple of years ago when we talked about this at council, we'd asked for, it'd be really nice to be able to see every parking garage with just some basic information. How much over, what's the cost of the repairs over time? What's the revenue over time? And what's the value of the garage? Or something similar to that, because we do need to start making some decisions about whether it's advantageous to sell all of the garages, one or two garages, we don't know at this point. So I think if we could focus on that, I mean, that's the biggest chunk of parking debt and everything else that we've got. So, and I think that along with the discussions with our community partners is something that needs to happen fairly quickly. So,
If I may, the parking performa that Jason referred to that we did with our finance counterpart and our consulting firm, it did spell out the parking ecosystem. So that's part of the methodology that was used to evaluate the value of the garages. Because if you sell one or two, you have to look at the system in totality because of the impact of the overhead and some of the other components that go with it, which make it very challenging. I have joked, and there's always some truth to jokes, I would love to sell the parking garage system and the parking system if somebody were willing to take it on. But in its current state, it's a very challenging business model. And being able to offer that service in terms of truly partnering with our downtown businesses and being able to work with them without the profit factor has, I think, really helped our downtown and helped gain that support. So it's probably not a very viable solution.
and I agree. Let me stop you there if I could. I understand you're passionate about this. It's a circle of life, though. If we're going to continue to provide parking garages for the downtown, businesses, retail, merchants, whatever, they can't expect us to lose money providing those parking stalls in parking garages. So we need to simply know if we can sell all of them, what's that going to mean? And maybe you're going to come back and say we can't do it. Nobody's going to buy it. I think at some point we might put an RFP out and see if that's truly the case. So if we can't sell them, if the city has to continue to maintain these garages, then we're going to have to raise rates. And the folks that benefit from those parking spaces need to understand why. Not just, hey, we're going to raise rates, because then it's, well, there goes the city raising rates again. So I think everybody's kind of on the same page, and I think that's certainly a topic we need to continue to discuss in the coming months. Any questions?
A couple questions. I wanted to jump kind of into the numbers a little bit from the standpoint of, so first question would be, do we do this on when we have a contract for, is it a monthly contract, an annual contract, 6-month contract for the parking garages? If, I wanted to go buy 4 stalls for my employees or something like that. Can you kind of tell me how that works?
It is month to month. For our employers that are only, getting 5 to 10 spaces. They can do that online and manage it month to month like that. We do have a few long-term contracts in place with some of the state agencies and some of our larger employers. But for the most part, it is a month to month.
And so then I'm looking at the revenue by month. It doesn't have a page about it, but budget overview. And so we forgave.
Sure.
We didn't charge
Correct.
for April and May. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess my only question on that, where I certainly understand that, is for those months that we didn't charge, who made the decision that we weren't going to do that?
It was myself making a recommendation to city manager, and city manager ultimately made that decision.
Okay. I guess that ship's already sailed a little bit. What I probably would have rather had a conversation about doing would have been, we're going to forgive April and May, but we're going to tack that on to the back end of whatever your agreement was for back when things become operational. It's probably too late to do that, but I know there's a lot of different, in my industry, we said you didn't have to pay for these 2 months, but you had to at some point pay for what you had, if that makes sense to you. So, but hopefully we don't have to deal with it again. So,
The vast majority of our customers are month to month. So when we were talking about it, and part of the reason why is that, quite frankly, we wanted to reduce the risk of our operational staff internally having to shut down a bunch of month-to-month lease payments just to pick them back up 2 months later. And so to help compensate during that time where people weren't working, and a lot of our employers being downtown maybe didn't have some of the benefit packages or some of the operational revenue to help support somebody while they were not working, we didn't want to put them in that hard position. So while it was kind of unsteady, that was a lot of our large, because to turn people on and off in our systems, especially our garage system, it's not a turn of a button. It takes a lot of staff time in terms of making sure we document the card numbers, we flip them off, we communicate. We do a lot of pieces that go into it. So part of it, while definitely for the community and their benefit, was also operationally for our benefit, which is why we started picking it back up when we noticed the trend of what was going to happen at that time.
the other question I have, on the graph, are the 2021 numbers through June, are those real numbers or are those projections?
Those are real.
Those are real.
Mm-hmm.
What have you, so June, we're almost through July, are you seeing it level out? Are we seeing a trend?
Yep. So early in the year, we were down, I believe in January, we were down 35% to 2019. For June, we were down 16%. So year to date, we're down 22%, but it has been climbing steadily since January. There is a little bit of a blip in there because we did have a large client who is past due, who did pay for some 2020 past due that they caught up on, which was a large bump in revenue in one of our garages. But for the most part, that's a pretty accurate number.
And so did I hear you say correctly? I want to make sure I still have COVID brain. Did you say the majority of them are month to month?
The majority of so the parking is paid month to month. Some of them are paid online, where if you don't pay for next month, your cards are just turned off. We do have some of our larger customers that have been on a billing basis with the city for a long time that did have past due balances that we did not turn all of their cards off in 2020, and then we were able to catch up.
What I'm trying to get is, do we do a month-to-month rate, and then do we do a 6-month rate,
We
a
do
year
not.
rate?
So we don't, unless it is we don't have an existing option that can be a negotiated contract, which has happened in the past with a few employers here and there, large scale.
Sure.
But the vast majority are month to month.
Well, that does then make me feel a little bit better. My concern was the accuracy of the numbers. If we had, year contract, 6-month contracts, and the fact that people are paying that, but there's so much remote, there again, that's part of my fear is the amount of remote employees and what effect that's going to have in occupancy, not only parking garage wise, but
Real estate,
wise.
yeah.
So that does make me feel better from an accuracy standpoint. Month to month, I think they would have already done that if they were staying home and not coming back. So thank you. That's all I had.
Nothing.
All right, thanks for the presentation, really good information. Obviously, a topic that we need to hit fairly hard over the next few months. I hate to do this, but we are getting close to our 4 o'clock time, and I know item number 8, speeding. I hate to speed through that.
I won't be able to speed through it. So
No.
it's a do it or don't do it kind of issue, whichever you prefer.
Well, how about do it at the next meeting? That's the option I think makes sense to us, so we're not running out of time. I, for one, have to leave in a few minutes here for another meeting, so if you don't mind, Chris,
Beverly's got his
hate to-
pedicure appointment.
hate to put you back off again, but I think it's a topic we need the time to discuss, so. All right. Any objection from the committee?
No.
I would just thought you could schedule your pedicure appointment for some other day.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fine,
hard to get
whatever.
in.
It's all about you.
It is. All right, so quickly, items from the staff.
I have none, Mr. Chair.
Any other items from the committee? Seeing none. Other items? We got any items? New items, old items?
Anybody?
Yeah. I don't think we have anything else, so meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, I do have one quick.
Certainly.
Are we on a recurring Monday deal?
Oh, we do need to set the next meeting, that's right.
It's set, the meetings are set through December.
Oh, okay.
Third Monday, 2 o'clock, this room.
Okay.
Is that okay? You want to look at changing it?
I would prefer them not be on a Monday, but we'll roll through December and do that.
You know, the
Mondays
other
are
option,
just- Mondays are tough.
yeah, the other option, and I know a lot of it depends on the availability of this room, but maybe look at some options and we can kick it around over the next couple
that's
weeks.
fine. Yeah,
All right, so third Monday of August, 2 o'clock. Thank you, meeting is adjourned. Oh, we probably did.